Hello and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Peel. Now here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. We start the news in Myanmar, where a powerful 7.7 magnitude earthquake has killed at least 144 people, with hundreds others injured across Myanmar and Thailand on Friday. The quake toppled buildings and bridges, trapping over 80 workers in an under-construction skyscraper in Bangkok. 81 construction workers are missing, the Thai Deputy Prime Minister says, and a search and rescue operation is underway. The quake's devastation prompted a rare request for international aid from Myanmar's isolated military junta, which has lost swaths of territory to armed groups. A state of emergency was declared across the 6 worst affected regions after the quake, which the World Health Organization described as a very big threat to life and health.
ဒီကတော့မန္တလေးမြို့စကိုင်းမြို့နေပြီးတော့မှာတော့ပျက်စီးမှုများပြားပါတယ်လက်ရှိကျွန်တော်ယနေ့ချိန်အယူချိန်ထိပို့တယ်တရင်ပို့ကြရတော့နေပြီးတော့ကောက်စီနေမျိုးက96ယောက်စကိုင်းမြို့မှာ18ယောက်ကြောက်စင်မှာ30ယောက်စွတ်စွတ်ပေါင်း144ယောက်တေဆုံးကြောင်းနဲ့ဒါရရတော့နေပြီးတော့ကောက်စီနေမျိုး132ယောက်စကိုင်းမြို့မှာ300ယောက်နဲ့ ကျောက်ဆယ်မြို့မှာစီစီဆယ်အလုံးပေါင်း932ယောက်ဒါရရှိတယ်လို့ကျွန်တော်သိရပါတယ်။ဒီဆုံးမှုနဲ့ဒါရရှိမှုတော့ဒီတဲ့တိုးလာစရာကျွန်တော်ရှိပါတယ်။တဘာဝမေးကြောင့်ဖြစ်လာတဲ့ငလင်းအန်ရကိုငလင်းထမ်းမှုကဲဆယ်ဖို့လုပ်ငန်းတွေကကျေပြတ်စွာလုပ်ဖို့ရှိတဲ့ကြောင့်တက်တဲ့လောက်ဝိုင်းကူညီပေးဖို့ကျွန်တော်တို့မြစ်တာရက်ခံလုပ်ပါတယ်။ကျွန်တော်အနေနဲ့လည်းဖြစ်ပွားတဲ့ဒေသအားလုံးလည်းရေးပေါ်ချင်းကြီးညာထားပြီးတော့ပြည်ပကူညီများပေးနိုင်မှုတွေအခုလက်မထားပြီးဖြစ်ပါတယ်။မကြသေးခင်ကပဲအာဟာစင်တာနေပြီးတော့လက်ထံမှာရေးဖို့ကိစ္စပစ္စည်းတွေပို့ဖို့နဲ့အိန္ဒိယနိုင်ငံလည်းလက်ထံမှာကိစ္စပစ္စည်းပို့ဖို့ကမ်းလာတာရှိတယ်လို့ဒါလည်းခွင့်ပြုထားပြီးဖြစ်ကြောင်းကျွန်တော်ပြောလိုပါတယ်
And now for more on this, I'm joined by our international correspondent Afua Hagan. Afua, good evening once again. I came to you in the afternoon to ask about details and updates, but let's do that again. What's the latest update on the earthquake in Myanmar?
Well, that's right. We have had the updated death tolls, which I think you mentioned, the Myanmar military leader saying that 144 people have been killed and 732 are injured after that earthquake. But their estimates there could be tens of thousands of people potentially killed. Remember, the military junta make it very hard to get information out of Myanmar, which is also going to make it very difficult to get aid in. But they have made that rare call for international aid, asking that any assistance should be given through independent local networks. About 600 miles away in Bangkok in Thailand, the effects of this earthquake have been felt. You had that building that was nearly finished. It was actually a Thai government building that the structure of it was completed in October last year. Finishing touches were being put to that building before it was due to be opened. So it had construction workers working on it when it pretty much folded like a house of cards, very reminiscent of the way the second tower fell during 9/11, and you also had, those pictures. I'm sure you've seen them of buildings swaying and water pouring out of swimming pools on top of these sort of 21-story buildings. So the effects of this earthquake being felt all through Southeast Asia. Of course, the epicenter was near Mandalay, the capital of Myanmar. That's where much of the damage will have occurred, but the effects being felt all over Southeast Asia.
So just how big was the earthquake in relative terms, and how common are earthquakes in that region?
Well, it was 7.7 on the scale of earthquakes. Anything 7 or above is considered a strong earthquake. So this one was pretty strong. It was also quite shallow, which means that instead of it being deep in the earth, it was sort of only 6 miles below the surface. So it was felt far and wide rather than deep into the earth. Now, these kind of earthquakes are relatively common in that part of the world, more common in Myanmar compared to Thailand. So between 1930 and 1956, there were 6 strong earthquakes, so 6 earthquakes that were magnitude 7 or over near the fault line that runs underneath this part of the world. Thailand is not necessarily an earthquake zone, and so any earthquakes that are felt there are rare. They are from somewhere else, like in Myanmar. The shallow ones, only 6 miles below the surface, like I said, went wide, and that's why they felt it in Thailand. Now, large earthquakes are due over these faults every decade or so, but one this size, of this magnitude, hasn't been felt since 1946. And that predates the development of lots of modern earthquake building codes, which means that there will be lots of buildings which will not be up to par for current earthquake codes, which means that there will also be lots and lots of damage.
Okay, Afua, we heard a word from the Geological Survey, and they say that Myanmar is at risk of liquefaction. Could you please explain to us what that means?
Yes, I've been hearing a lot about liquefaction this afternoon. And basically, this can cause damage to buildings because liquefaction is a process for which the soil, so the ground underneath, all the buildings, loses its strength and becomes water saturated and starts to behave like a liquid, essentially. And liquefaction can be triggered by earthquakes. Quite strong earthquakes. And so if the ground is unstable, starts to behave like a liquid, then you could see more damage to buildings because the foundation on which they were built is no longer solid, is become liquefied, liquefaction has occurred, and so the earth is moving, not because of the earthquake, because now the earth is behaving like a liquid and buildings will continue to fall. And that is at risk of happening in this potential area because of the strength of the earthquake. And also you run the risk of landslides as well.
Okay then, well, Afua, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed once again on the situation in Myanmar. Thank you. Now, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife, Usha Vanchahav, arrived in Greenland for a visit to a military base to the U.S. Pituffik Space Base on the island's northwestern. The visit comes at a time when President Donald Trump is seeking to annex the strategically placed, resource-rich Danish territory. Trump had argued that the United States needs the vast Arctic island for national and international security and has refused to rule out the use of force to get it. The U.S. delegation included National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Energy Secretary Chris Wright. They were due to meet U.S. Space Force members and check out what's going on with the security of Greenland. Danish and Greenlandic officials, backed by the European Union, have insisted the United States will not get Greenland. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has condemned the U.S. decision to visit the Arctic island uninvited for what was initially a broader visit to Greenlandic society as unacceptable pressure on Greenland and Denmark. The majority of Greenlanders opposed U.S. annexation, according to a January poll. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has hailed his first phone call with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, describing it as extremely productive. While Trump didn't provide specific details on the topics discussed, his post on his social media platform, Truth Social, indicated positive sentiments about the talks and future meeting with the Prime Minister after Canada's upcoming election. Trump said the meeting will focus on working on elements of politics, business, and all other factors that will end up being great for both the United States of America and Canada. King Charles III has cancelled a planned visits to Birmingham after a brief hospital stay due to temporary side effects from his cancer treatment. Buckingham Palace say the king remains committed to his duties and is expected to resume his schedule next week. The monarch has now left Clarence Hospital, or rather House of Highgrove, where he will recover over the weekend. For News Central, Afua Hagan here brings us more.
It was a brief and low-key hospital visit for King Charles, with Buckingham Palace keen to emphasise that this was just a minor setback. After receiving treatment, the 76-year-old monarch returned to Clarence House, where he continues to work on state matters. Despite the disruption to his schedule, the king remains active behind the scenes. He has been reviewing state papers and making calls from his study. However, on medical advice, he has postponed Friday's planned engagements in Birmingham, which included 4 events. A palace spokesperson said Charles is greatly disappointed to miss the visit and hopes it will be rescheduled soon. The king also had to cancel meetings with ambassadors, but there is no indication that his overall health has significantly worsened. Details of the side effects he experienced have not been disclosed. However, the palace framed the visit as precautionary. The king arrived at the London clinic in a private car rather than an ambulance, an indication that there was no urgent crisis. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla carried on with her schedule, attending a reception in London. In recent weeks, Charles has remained highly visible, travelling to Northern Ireland, attending the Commonwealth Day service, and even playing a role in global diplomacy. The palace insists this remains a temporary setback. Next week's engagements are expected to go ahead as planned, and the king's wider state visit to Italy is still scheduled for April, with only minor adjustments. While his cancer treatment is ongoing, King Charles has shown no signs of stepping back from his duties. Buckingham Palace continues to send a message of reassurance. This was a pause, not a stop. For News Central, I'm Afua Hagan.
Now let's go on a break, and we've got more inside Beyond the Continent. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Now, Vladimir Putin has suggested that Ukraine should temporarily be placed under UN control to elect what he called a more competent government. It is the latest attempt by the Russian president to challenge the legitimacy of the Kiev government. Ukraine accused Putin of proposing crazy ideas to delay further movements toward a peace deal, being championed by U.S. President Donald Trump. The White House insisted Ukraine's governance would be decided by its constitution and people. Putin's remarks comes as the U.S. seeks to broker a ceasefire in the full-scale war with Ukraine, now into its 4th year. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has dismissed a proposal by Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin that Ukraine could have an interim government overseen by the UN, calling this a ploy to delay peace. Now, in his words, everything Putin does delays any possibility, any process, any negotiation, and delays any possibility are steps towards ending the war. Zelensky spoke at a press conference in Kiev in response to Vladimir Putin's call for Ukraine to temporarily be placed under UN control to elect a new government. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Kiev will or has formally received a new minerals deal proposal from the United States. The new deal, he says, will grant access to Ukraine's natural resources in exchange for further military support. A planned deal on extracting strategically important minerals in Ukraine with the United States had been set to be signed in Washington last month until a spectacular television clash between U.S. President Donald Trump and Zelensky. Zelensky said that his government needed to review the text of the draft agreement. Ukraine once hoped to get security guarantees in exchange for access to mineral resources, but initially drafts included little protection, and Washington has rejected sending any peacekeeping force to Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron has debated, or rather berated, Israeli forces for the reported airstrike it fired on Lebanon earlier on Friday. He said the strike violates the ceasefire describing it as unacceptable. Now, Israel commenced airstrike in Beirut after rockets were fired towards its territory, rattling an already fragile truce in Lebanon, which largely ended more than a year of hostilities with Hezbollah. It was the second time rockets had been launched at Israel from Lebanon since the November ceasefire, and the second time the Iran-backed Hezbollah denied involvement. After the attack, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said there will be no quiet in Beirut if there is no quiet in Kiryat, Shimona, and the Galilee communities. Emmanuel Macron, however, criticized Israel while playing host to its Lebanese, Greek, and Cypriot counterparts at the LC Palace for the discussion on the Eastern Mediterranean. And in a major breakthrough, France's most wanted fugitive Mohamed Amra has been taken into custody after being extradited from Romania. French authorities confirmed that Mohamed Amra, who has been on the run since his escape last May in an ambush that left 2 prison officers dead, is now in French custody and will be held in extremely strict solitary confinement. He was identified through facial recognition tools and fingerprints after he changed his appearance and dyed his hair orange while on the run. At the time of his escape last May, Amra was facing 1 charge of attempted murder and another for involvement in a gang-related killing in Maceió, a southern city known for drug trade and criminal activities. Amra is now indicted on multiple crime charges, including murder, before an investigating magistrate in Paris late Tuesday after his extradition from Romania. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot confirmed that Chinese authorities have agreed to extend their investigation into the import of French cognac and Armagnac for 3 months. This delay means China won't immediately impose tariffs on the products, which had been a significant worry for French producers. The investigation was triggered after the European Union introduced tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, a move that led to tensions between the EU and China. As a result, French cognac sales to China saw a sharp drop last year. However, the temporary tariffs on cognac imports will remain in place for now. Despite the uncertainty, shares of French alcohol giants like Remy, Conteur, and also Pernod Ricard have seen a small rise, reflecting some relief in markets.
Le risque auquel était confrontée la filière jusqu'à hier, c'était l'application définitive à l'issue de la période de l'enquête qui devait se terminer le 5 avril prochain, c'est-à-dire dans moins d'une semaine, ou dans une semaine. À l'issue de cette visite, il m'est confirmé que l'enquête est repoussée de 3 mois, ce qui écarte le scénario d'une application.
Nepal police have fired tear gas and water cannons to disperse thousands of people gathered in the Kathmandu region, demanding the restoration of the monarchy in the country. The Himalayan nation adopted a federal and republican political system in 2008 after Parliament abolished the monarchy as part of a peace deal that ended a decade-long civil war responsible for more than 16,000 deaths. Support for the restoration of the monarchy re-enshrined Hinduism as the state religion has grown as a result of the popular dissatisfaction over political instability, corruption, and also lackluster economic development. Protesters gathered near the national parliament chanting that the king and country were dearer to them than life. Police spokesman Dinesh Kumar Acharya said they fired tear gas and water cannon to clear the demonstrators after they broke into a restricted area and vandalized buildings. Meanwhile, local authorities have announced a curfew in the area following the clash. In more news, a wildfire has caused significant damage to buildings in Nomul-ri, a seaside village in Yeonduk, North Gyeongsang Province in South Korea, forcing about 37,000 people to evacuate. The fire, which broke out earlier this week, spread quickly due to strong winds affecting homes and local businesses in the area. Firefighters and emergency responders worked through the night to contain the blaze, but several structures have already been severely damaged or destroyed. Fortunately, no casualties have been reported so far, though authorities are continuing to assess the full impact. Local officials are now focusing on evacuating residents and preventing the fire from spreading further. The cause of the wildfire is still under investigation, and efforts are underway to provide aid to those affected. And that's all on Beyond the Continent this evening. Now, do remember that you may send your eyewitness reports to the WhatsApp number on your screen now. And do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You may also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Evo TV, and of course on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.